Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
President Trump, unrestrained, unleashed, and unrepentant. On a tear, settling scores after his acquittal 1 week ago in the Senate. Since then, here's a bit of a reminder of what the president has done. He fired impeachment witness, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, fired Vindman's twin brother, who had nothing to do with Ukraine policy or impeachment. He removed Ambassador Gordon Sondland. He vowed revenge. And then, in quick succession, he has attacked the judge and prosecutors handling the criminal case of his longtime friend and ally, Roger Stone. All of this in the week since the Senate vote and Senate Republicans saying that they think that Trump had learned his lesson.
I believe that the president has learned from this case. I believe that he will be much more cautious in the future.
Are you confident the president's not going to simply ask another foreign power to investigate a political rival again?
Yes. I think there are lessons that everybody can learn from it.
I think the message has been delivered. Again, if you listen to not just what I've said, but what so many other senators have said on our side of the aisle, as well as obviously the whole process of impeachment, I think it's clear now where that line is.
To be fair, they were talking about lessons learned over potential abuse of power and pushing a foreign government to investigate a political rival. But do you think Republicans will be saying the same today on this topic? CNN caught up with several Republican senators this morning already, Manu Raju working the hallways, and he put that question to many of them. They didn't want to answer. They are dodging the questions right now. Joining me right now, CNN senior political analyst John Avlon and White House correspondent John Harwood. Good to see you guys. So, John Avlon, what is the takeaway from this week with this president?
The president is not remotely restrained. The senators who said that were wishing and hoping, naive in the extreme, willfully blinded by partisan self-interest. And they'll be too afraid to condemn the president now for something that they would condemn a Democratic president on a dime for doing even 1/4 of this. This is a president who is angry. He is unhinged and he is unaccountable because his attorney general seems to believe his job is to act as the president's personal attorney. That is a very dangerous circumstance that, frankly, the founders and the framers didn't anticipate.
Or he's hinged, and this is exactly what his hinge is. He knows exactly what he is doing with what he was trying to do.
I wouldn't say control. Self-control is a real hallmark of this presidency.
Nor does he want it. No. John Harwood, what is the message then that folks there, where you are getting from this?
Well, they're getting the message that this president is going to proceed on the course he wants to proceed on. Hogan Ginley, the deputy White House press secretary, was just out in the White House driveway telling reporters the president had every right to talk to Bill Barr, even though he did not do so, but that he could. He's the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. That is correct. But, of course, interfering in cases like this and seeking retribution is contrary to American traditions of equal justice under law and non-political interference in the Justice Department. So I think members of the White House staff, even if privately they would like to restrain him, know that the president, who is impulsive, who's headstrong, who doesn't listen to aides who try to impede what he wants to do, is going to do precisely what he wants to do. And the last few days have just given us a taste of it.
And the two areas that can offer restraint would be Congress and also Inspector General, let's say, of the Justice Department in terms of what we've seen of late. Do the Republicans so far, they're dodging the question on it. I've seen some of the interviews that Manu has been asking and some of the questions he's been asking them. Do you I do not want to ask the question because I think we all know the answer of, like, what do Republicans do now?
Yeah.
But in doing nothing, is it just at this point like outrage, fatigue, and a shoulder shrug?
I think it's more than that, and it should be. Look, democracy is not a spectator sport. Part of the strategy of a blizzard of lies is to overwhelm people. It's to overwhelm our ability to take in the outrage of the day. And there's a lot of fake outrage in politics, but then there's the stuff that really stands out if you use anything resembling historic standards.
And a lot of folks are telling you what has happened since yesterday is that.
Is absolutely part of that. The idea of impartial justice is core to the credibility of the Justice Department. And right now what Republicans and White House staff are backing themselves into, whether they want to admit it or not, is advancing the Nixon standard of if the president does it, that means it isn't illegal. That is contrary to all of our best intentions, especially from anyone who had the pretense of calling himself a constitutional conservative once.
John Harwood, real quick, any indication that this President Unleashed goes beyond a direct response to impeachment or anything relating to the Mueller investigation?
I don't think so, but you could certainly imagine it doing that. The president's certainly not going to be constrained by his moral sense on that, because by his words and actions, he has indicated he doesn't have a very active moral sense. He's going to do what he thinks is in his short-term best interest, and if that in the future goes to things like punishing people who vote against him on legislation, nobody would be surprised to see it.
It is Thursday, the 13th of February of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Once again, I should remind you, to those folks who are purity trolls out there, I need to say, you maintain that the grit is not part of New Orleans, and I say I know. It's part of that whole seaboard, and some of the best grits I've ever had has been in New Orleans. So I'm just saying, all right? None of that powdery, dried stuff out of a box either. We're talking real grits. All right, well, Trump is now going after the jurors in the Stone trial. I suppose each one of those are going to be doxxed, because apparently the only people who could sit in judgment of Trump are those who kiss his ass. And I got to tell you, I don't think even that's good enough. There got to be a little bit of tongue action there, too, for that guy to allow anybody to sit in judgment with him. The only people who can sit in judgment are the ones who will never judge him. And that's called a fair trial. That's right. Now let's remind ourselves what Stone was convicted of. He was convicted of 5 counts of lying. Perjury is what they call it. Perjury. What else did he do? Well, he intimidated a witness. He threatened a witness with physical violence. And their little dog, too. And, let's not even talk about threatening the judge. There's that also. I don't even think that's an actual charge, but that's in there, too. Stone was gagged. Gagged? I wish he would have been. But he was gagged from posting on social media because of those threats. So when you get somebody like a Charlie Kirk out there saying, he wasn't able to manipulate the jurors through social media, his rights were taken away, and the foreman of the jury was a Hillary supporter. Look, once again, Charlie, when you've spent a little bit more time on the earth, you might learn to shut up. Because you're an idiot. First of all, like I said, Stone was gagged from posting on social media because of threats to the judge and witnesses. He was warned. He violated it again and again and again. And he was sanctioned. And number 2, if you have a problem with a juror, you do that in voir dire. Okay? When you're interviewing the jurors, you look into the jurors. That's when you do it. Blame is lawyers. Don't blame, the deep state. That's what they're trying to do. And for Trump to go on TV yesterday, and this is the other thing I don't understand. There are a bunch of stenographers standing around him. I wish somebody would actually be our reporter. But he's going off on the judge, going off on the prosecutors, going off on Vindman's brother. What did Vindman's brother do? He was named Vindman. Everything Lieutenant Colonel Vindman told his father not to fear, they are now experiencing it, just like in the former Soviet bloc. Isn't that a convenient outcome? Very convenient now, isn't it? This guy breaks the law every day, and I wish just one stenographer would become a reporter when they're standing right there and he's lying his ass off. Why can't someone just say, be polite, say, you stupid idiot, you're lying. Maybe they should be a little bit more polite. I think to be able to get the question in, they have to say, Mr. President. So they could ask or present themselves, Mr. President, this is idiocy. Trump will then say, you called me an idiot? I go, I'm just saying this whole thing is idiocy, Mr. President. What you are talking about right now are abject lies. Why cannot one person stand up and say that? They're afraid of not getting access anymore? You don't need access for that kind of spew. How about asking a real question? How about posing a truth when a lie has been uttered? I know he overwhelms with the lies. It's the Gish Galat BS. Lie, 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 lie. Overwhelmed with lies. But it would be nice. Well, of course, the reason there's no press conferences is people like Karam asked questions. Actual questions. Now we get speeches. We get rants. And the New York Times then says, Trump's issue with the deep state. You idiots. Who writes the headlines at the New York Times? I have an idea. Let's just put Russian propaganda and Trump agitprop on the front page of the New York Times, the paper of record. Yeah, they're wrecking stuff. It's enough to make one livid. Is it enough to get us into the streets? I don't know. I guess we don't do that anymore. Of course, I do sense the sleeping giant is rumbling. I do sense that people are upset. Will we go out in the streets? That remains to be seen. But I do know what's going to happen. There's 23 Republican senators up for re-election in November. I know that they represent mostly vacant land. And so it's kind of easy to win when there's just a few people on that vacant land. Maybe we could get some Steyer and Bloomberg money to maybe manipulate a few mines. The few mines that are in all that vacant land. You know that the other side's doing it right now. And have been for decades. I mean, if we're going to go after hearts and minds, we might as well try to go after hearts and minds. We haven't been doing it because, there's just a bunch of vacant land there with only a few people. And those few people keep electing senators who seem to have the same amount of power as a senator who represents, how about 10 million people? You get a senator who represents, maybe a couple 100,000, maybe. And then you get a senator that represents about 10 million people or more. Well, it has to be more now that I think about it. The Bay Area and San Francisco alone is 7 million people. Okay, let's say senators from their area representing in their area 10 million people. And then a senator in some place like Wyoming, they're not even, let's just say in their area. What's that going to be? 20,000 maybe? 8? And that's a big town in Wyoming. 8,000 people? Wow. Got to have a couple of stoplights at that place. So we have outsized power in the hands of senators who represent vacant land, with few people on that vacant land, and they've been brainwashed for decades. Don't you think we should try a little bit of Steyer and Bloomberg money and maybe brainwash them back? I know that's stupid. We could simply just, start telling the truth. We could just simply start reminding people about what the facts are about American civics. We could. And also one other thing. We always have to have the New York Times interviewing the rural voter. How about interviewing the rural voter who had to escape rural America? How about the rural refugee? No one ever interviews them about what they think. There's a reason people flee rural America. It's because the few people that live there are zombies. Listening to Limbaugh and worse. Yeah, there's worse than Limbaugh out there in rural America land. Yeah, do we give up on the zombies? I suppose. Their brains are rotted and their hearts are foul. But I don't know. I still think that maybe we should go after hearts and minds a little bit. Maybe hand out a chicken or two for their pot. Or how about some pot and a chicken? What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, Trump and Barr continue to be excoriated over Roger Stone, and I think that's going to go down in the annals of history. Probably in other countries, because the history will probably be manipulated to the exact opposite of what it is now here. We run that risk, especially with the Texas Board of Education in play. Don't forget that. Well, that's a tangent. Back here in the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An Oregon man reported workplace racism, so his boss had the town's racist cops arrest him, and it resulted in a $600,000 fine. And guess what? The DA's just now going to look into what happened with those cops. Republicans on the House Intel Committee skipped a national security hearing because they're still mad about being caught in the Russia probe. Yeah, they deny it, but they got caught red-handed. Yeah, that's why they're trying to shut everything up. And the Bureau of Land Management's new policy to defer to constitutional sheriffs in the rural West is contributing to chaos and fear around federal lands. Feature, not a bug now. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the former head of Mexico's state oil firm Pemex is arrested by police in Malaga, Spain, where he fled to avoid corruption charges. And Italian senators voted to lift immunity for far-right leader Matteo Salvini, opening the way for a career-ending trial that he illegally detained migrants at sea last year. Some places in the world actually hold their leaders to account for criminal conduct. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page, is our chat room link. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the page is the link to our Patreon page. And do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio if you could afford the cost of, say, an espresso-type coffee drink. If you could send those funds once a month to us, we are able to stretch those dollars on the quantum level beyond compare. Hey, we are, and we're masters at it. And you could almost say we're masters of the universe at stretching dollars beyond compare, at least on the quantum level. Without your generosity, all kidding aside, we would not be able to pay our bills. And thank you for allowing us to be this powerhouse of resistance for over 8 years now, going on 9. Wow, continuous 24/7, 365 powerhouse of resistance radio. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, of course, and thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary. Of course, it's a diary, so it's on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then link that up on social media, wherever those social media platforms are. Well, the links on the Daily Co's pages are to Twitter and that evil Facebook. God. Well, Facebook is almost like a necessity, isn't it? We should charge them like a utility. Yeah, we'll see if Zuckerberg likes that. Regardless, if you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Let's dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Don't forget that. And this comes our way by Travis Geddes out of Raw Story. Now, I should mention, actually, I was reminded of the story because this event actually occurred in 2017 or so. But some new developments have come about, and my friend Bob, who lives up in the Sierras near Reno, I guess that would still be the Sierras, near Reno, sent me the Las Vegas Gazette's article on this, and it reminded me of the event, and I had to dig around a little bit, but fortunately Travis Geddes has a pretty good synopsis of what occurred here. And I should also mention that my friend Bob, he and I have known each other since we played football at El Dorado High School all those many, 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 many years ago. And we had fallen out of communication because we didn't have social media. We didn't have email, People moved around, and sometimes they didn't. But you still lost contact over the many, many years. When we did meet up and communicated when the internet came about, he told me that he embarked upon his life of politics. He had been a really good photographer, did sports photography at a lot of different places, and did some sports shows on the radio and whatnot, in small market radio in Northern California and Nevada. When my friend John Konishofer and I organized and held the first Impeach Nixon rally west of the Rockies, because there had been some, I think there had been one in Ann Arbor and a few others east of that. But west of the Rockies, we held the first Impeach Nixon rally, just happened to be in Yorba Linda, his birthplace, mere steps from the house he was born in that has now been turned into the Nixon Library. But because of that rally, he said he had a political awakening. And it wasn't really a rally of sorts. We called it a teach-in because we had lectures. And, there was some entertainment, too, of course, because, hey, you got to have some kind of stagecraft to keep people around. Yeah, a woman's auxiliary sold cookies and other baked goods nearby. It was really quite fun out in the open. It was a nice April day. And so he said that his political awakening occurred at that impeach Nixon rally, and remembered me because of it, and that made me feel pretty darn good. So thank you, Bob. That was a nice compliment to give me. But Bob sent this article along, and I had to dig a little bit deeper, but it is infuriating. A black Oregon man was awarded an additional $600,000 after his former boss called in a favor from a police chief friend and had him arrested for reporting workplace discrimination. Michael Fesser brought his concerns in February of 2017 about racial harassment by coworkers to Eric Benson, owner of A&B Towing in Southeast Portland. Oh, A&B. I suppose that Benson must be the B part. Who's A? Well, Fesser complained other employees called him racial slurs and asked how he liked a Confederate flag placed on a pickup parked in the company's lot. You know, I argue with people here in Southern Oregon that say it's perfectly okay. I mean, that black guy, look, if he doesn't like working there, he doesn't have to work there. If he doesn't want a Confederate flag around, he doesn't have to work there. Of course, I don't call it the Confederate flag. It's the Dixie swastika. All right? Let's remember that. Why do I call it that? Well, for many reasons, but the reason I began calling it that is because in Germany, they don't allow the swastika. So white nationalist neo-Nazis carry the Confederate flag around instead. The Dixie swastika. Benson responded to Fesser's complaint by calling in a favor from fishing buddy Terry Timius, who was West Linn's police chief at the time, and asked officers to put together a theft case against Fesser before he could sue the company for racial discrimination. They started out by trying to assassinate my character, Fesser told Coin TV. The case had no ties to West Linn, but officers working as Timius's personal posse began making surreptitious audio recordings of Fesser at work without warrant or court order. Personal posse is just a nice way of saying that these are racist cops. Other news organizations like the Las Vegas Gazette that Bob sent me called them rogue racist cops. The 48-year-old eventually filed a lawsuit which turned up numerous racist and crude text messages between the former police chief and Benson aimed at Fesser and others. The West Linn detective who led the bogus investigation deleted the offensive text from his own phone, but court records show they were found on another. Well, usually when you're texting people, it's a two-way street now, isn't it? Fesser, a father of 8, who now runs a prison ministry and a post-prison transition program for former inmates, said he took legal action to prevent such abuses from happening to other black men. I don't know. I'd like him to just stop doing it to him, too. Would that be nice? Ever since that arrest, I was terrified to go to West Linn, Fesser told the newspaper. He had been speaking with the Oregonian, I should mention. This has to be exposed, and it has to stop. Fesser was indicted in November 2017 based on grand jury testimony from Benson and West Linn detective Tony Reeves, along with 2 witnesses described by West Linn police as shady, but lawyers for his former boss offered to have the charges dismissed if he dropped his civil lawsuit. Really now? Nearly a year after the arrest, Fesser's lawyers received the damning text messages and the case swiftly moved forward. Benson and A&B Towing agreed in March of 2018 to pay Fesser $415,000 in damages, wages, and attorney fees to settle his discrimination suit, and West Linn agreed this week, 3 years after his first complaint about workplace harassment, to settle for $600,000 for his wrongful arrest. We hope that our local police will take the very strong local and national reaction we are seeing to this case as a strong message that reform is required, Fesser's attorney Paul Buchanan said. It is scary that the police can so readily make up claims that are not true. I'm old enough to remember the Rampart scandal. I know that the attorney is just being rhetorical, but welcome to the party, pal. Singer of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Republicans on the House Intel Committee boycotted a hearing this week on how new technologies could impact national security because they were upset about issues stemming from the nearly 2-year-long Russia investigation. Oh, issues? How about issues of Devin Nunes being pretty much a mole working for Vlad? How about that? That's stating it pretty clearly now, isn't it? In a letter to House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff, the GOP lawmakers said they would not be attending Wednesday's hearing, that was yesterday, because Democrats have yet to hold hearings on the FISA court warrant that was used on former Trump campaign aide Carter Page. Everything about Carter Page and after was illegal. Everything Mueller lied. Mueller lied. He lied. He lied. Mueller lied. Republicans have wrongly claimed that the Russia investigation was illegitimate because Page was illegally surveilled. And after that, Mueller lied. An Inspector General report issued late last year, however, showed the investigation was legitimate and that while there was overreach in the FISA process, specifically misconduct by one lawyer who omitted key information that may have made Page look less suspicious, because he still looked damn suspicious. Let's be clear about that, all right? But this is what cops do, and it really bothers me when cops do this. I don't know this is a lawyer, but they're kind of like cops in this situation as well. You don't need to sweeten the evidence. It's good enough. And good enough is they got a slam dunk. You don't need to add to the slam dunk with some sort of flourish that gets called as a foul and they take the points away. Stop it. Well, the FBI still had sufficient reason to open a deeper investigation into ties between Russia and the Trump campaign, because you might think about a person named Manafort who's in jail right now. The GOP lawmaker said this week that a hearing about the FISA warrant on Page was still more important than the scheduled hearing on emerging technology such as artificial intelligence and their potential impact on national security, because they got to fix it for Donnie. So these other aspects of national security are really less important when we got to deal with the national security threats sitting there in the Oval Office. Even they know that the whole thing could blow up, as if it hasn't already. But I mean, literally, the guy could just direct Russian military. He doesn't even have to do that. He could ask his own military to take out the Capitol building, maybe. And I'm just upset. It was all fake anyway. The jury foreman wrote some pro-Hillary things one time. Jesus H. My God. Until the committee prioritizes oversight activities related to urgent and critical concerns, Republican members cannot support distractions from our core responsibilities, they wrote in a letter, which was signed by the GOP committee members, including Devin Turncoat Nunes. The lawmakers also demanded that the Intel Committee hold more hearings in secret, rather than public hearings like the one on Wednesday. Given this committee's access to highly sensitive information that will definitely implicate us more and more into this nefarious deed to take over the United States for our own nefarious ends. Oh, am I adding to that? Is that sarcasm? Yes, it's sarcasm. It is concerning that you prioritize publicity events rather than the more productive work that occurs in the committee's classified space. Oh, you mean like covering up the truth? Republicans infamously stormed a secure room in the Capitol last October where an impeachment inquiry deposition was taking place, risking national security in the process. And the lawmakers were upset at the time that impeachment hearings were taking place in a classified setting. So they decided to do what Nunes is accusing the Democrats of doing. It's all for the cameras. Well, you know what? Everything they do is for the cameras. It's the only way that they can brainwash the very few people who live in all that vacant space out there. Democratic lawmakers on the committee called out their Republican colleagues for skipping the security hearing. This morning, the House Intel Committee is holding a hearing on national security. Notice the empty dais? Republicans are skipping it because they say the House has been mean to Trump. And Representative Bill Pascrell, a Democrat of New Jersey, he's also a junior, too. He had tweeted that along with a photo of the empty Republican seats. This is the Republican Party, Pascrell tweeted. Trump pity parties over U.S. national security. David Neward over at Crooks and Liars brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Far-right constitutionalist theories, the kind claiming that the U.S. Constitution's text places severe limits on the power of the federal government, handing supreme power to local authorities, have been around for decades, but their multifarious claims and arguments have never been acknowledged by any American court, nor has their legitimacy ever been recognized by any federal or state authority until now. The Trump administration has been quietly empowering a far-right extremist ideology on public lands in the West. Two recent investigative reports have informed us. Under a policy declared last November by the BLM acting chief, they can never get these people nominated and pass through the process and confirmed, but they can pretty much destroy America. Deconstruct the administrative state with acting chiefs, like the one at the BLM, William Perry Penley. The BLM now defers enforcing the law to local constitutionalist sheriffs, creating widespread chaos and environmental destruction. Christopher Ketchum's recent profile of Penley in the New Republic laid bare the open hostility the man in charge of America's largest portfolio of public lands has toward their very existence. The resulting policy, as another report from Type Investigations and Politico lays bare, has led the BLM to repeatedly ignore its own regulations, leading to a culture of lawlessness in the West. Trump himself sent a clear signal fairly early on in his presidential tenure that he was sympathetic to constitutionalist claims when he issued a pardon for Oregon ranchers Dwight and Stephen Hammond. The two men's ongoing battle with the BLM had long been a focus of anti-government groups' recruitment efforts, culminating in the early 2016 standoff between federal authorities and a group of constitutionalists who led an armed takeover of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. And why were the Hammonds being protected by these constitutionalists? Because they were poaching hundreds of deer on federal land and started a forest fire to cover up their tracks. There's more in this article by Newart, so do check it out. But we got to get to our break. Look at the time. Oh, my. When we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook at Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. Dogs began to diverge from wolves tens of thousands of years ago when their wild ancestors started interacting with humans. Over time, domestication shaped canine behavior, and today dogs are especially adept at understanding cues from humans. For example, when a person points at a bowl, a pet dog will usually approach it.
All kinds of complex pointing gestures have been tried with pet dogs, and they seem to be good at it.
Behavioral biologist Anandita Badru of the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research. Wolves are a different story, however.
When same experiments are done with semi-captive wolves, wolves seem to be quite bad at it. So there's this big open question of how did dogs become dogs?
Badru is interested in whether dogs require training to understand cues like pointing, or if the behavior is innate. Most studies have focused on pet dogs in developed countries, but Badru thinks it's a mistake to overlook how stray dogs respond to human cues.
In India, we have a huge population of stray dogs. They are not controlled by humans and they live on the streets for generations. So we felt that the free-ranging dogs are a very nice system which could give us inputs about what dogs could have been like before they came into our homes, before we made them parts of our families.
For the study, the researchers approached stray dogs on the streets of several Indian cities. One experimenter presented the dogs with a piece of raw chicken in a plastic bowl. About half of the time, the dogs ran away scared, but the friendlier dogs that stuck around were tested for their ability to respond to pointing.
And the idea was to test the innate ability of dogs to understand simple gestures like pointing cues when they have no training whatsoever.
Once a dog proved interested, the first experimenter put chicken in one of two bowls and covered both bowls. A second experimenter, who had no knowledge of which bowl contained the meat and thus could not give subconscious cue information, pointed at one of the bowls while the dog watched.
And then in this experiment, about 80% actually followed the point and went to the bowl that we pointed towards.
That result was true whether the experimenter pointed at it just momentarily or for an extended period of time. Badru thinks this demonstration provides evidence that training is not required for dogs to understand complex pointing cues. The study is in the journal Frontiers in Psychology. Perhaps further studies with feral canines can help reveal more about what makes dogs our best friends. Apparently, even when a person and a dog have just met. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC. For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. What labor union would you say has the coolest name? The Sons of Vulcan would most certainly have to be in the running. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1865. That was the day the Sons of Vulcan ended their 8-month strike and won a union contract. The Vulcans were skilled steelworkers. Many were immigrants from England, Scotland, and Wales. They worked at puddling, the process by which carbon was burnt off of molten iron in order to form steel. It was tough work that required physical strength, skill, and experience. The Vulcans first formed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1858. A skilled trade union, only puddlers were eligible to join. They called their locals forges. They took their name, Vulcan, from the Roman god of fire and volcanoes. With the ongoing Civil War, the demand for steel grew. The work of the Vulcans was vital to the Union's war effort. But as the Civil War drew to a close, puddlers' wages were threatened. The Vulcans declared a national strike. The strike wore on for 8 months. Finally, the industry leaders agreed to the workers' demands. The Vulcans won wage increases tied to industry profits as well as union recognition. With this victory, the Vulcans' membership grew. By 1873, the number of Vulcans had topped 3,000 members. Unfortunately, that year saw a major economic panic sweep across the United States. The economic crisis took a toll on union membership. Another downfall of the union was their policy not to admit black members. This meant that employers could hire black labor in an effort to undermine the union. By 1876, the Vulcans had merged with other steel unions to form the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 29 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high again in the mid-50s, a mix of clouds and sun early, followed by cloudy skies this afternoon. Winds will be out of the west-southwest in about an hour or so at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Will remain at that clip until, well, a little bit later tonight, where they will decrease to light and variable. Overnight lows in the mid to low 30s. And then tomorrow, intervals of clouds and sunshine with a high in the low 50s. The winds will remain light and variable. Pollen is at none. The air quality index locally is good at 22 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is in the moderate range at 3. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.09 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles here where I'm at the mothership, and relative humidity is at 96%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 49 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 52 and cloudy with wind. Rome is 57 and fair. Kyiv is 37 and cloudy. Kabul is 32 with fog. Hong Kong is 64 degrees and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 52 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 69 with fire-dousing rain showers. San Francisco, California is 49 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 41 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Adriana Barrera and Emma Pinedo of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spanish police yesterday, Wednesday, arrested Emilio Lozoya, the former chief executive of Mexico state oil firm Pemex, giving Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador as his first high-profile win in his government's anti-corruption drive. Lozoya, who has not been seen publicly since mid-2019, I wonder why, is accused in Mexico of corruption related to a wide-ranging bribery and money laundering case involving Brazilian construction firm Odebrecht S.A. He has denied any wrongdoing. His detention is a major coup for López Obrador, a leftist who won power on an anti-corrupt platform and was sought to paint former administration officials as members of a corrupt elite since taking office in December of 2018. Lozoya, who was indicted in Mexico last year, was one of former President Enrique Peña Nieto's closest aides and ran Petróleos Mexicanos, known as Pemex, from 2012 to 2016.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Angelo Amante of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, it looks like the Italians have fed up with their right-wing demagogue, and they've taken all presidential immunity away from this guy. Italian senators voted to lift immunity for far-right leader Matteo Salvini, opening the way for a potentially career-ending trial over accusations that he illegally detained migrants at sea last year. The decision gives magistrates in Sicily the go-ahead to press charges over his decision to keep more than 100 migrants blocked aboard a Coast Guard ship for 6 days last July as he waited for other EU states to agree to take them in. Salvini, who was serving as Interior Minister at the time, could eventually face up to 15 years in jail if found guilty at the end of Italy's torturous legal process. Conviction could also bar him from political office, dashing his ambitions to lead a future government. The Upper House Senate voted 152 to 76 in favor of removing the legal protection that has shielded him as a former cabinet minister. The ruling coalition of the anti-establishment Five Star Movement, the center-left Democratic Party, and other small centrist and leftist groups supported lifting his immunity. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on for all day and all night, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Mood Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news of Trump's crimes. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.